Welcome to the New York Business Leaders Podcast, presented by the Coyle Group. We interview the most interesting and influential business leaders in New York and hear their stories of success, challenges, and lessons learned while building their businesses and personal brands. New episodes drop weekly, so please be sure to subscribe to get updates in your favorite stream. Without further delay, here's your host of the New York Business Leaders Podcast, Gordon Coyle.
Welcome back to the New York Business Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Gordon Coyle. In this episode, I welcome my friend Peter Morandi from Eastman Cooke Construction on to talk about his firm, the construction scene in the New York metro area, as well as a project Peter is very passionate about, the workforce training program at LaGuardia College. That program is providing young people a more realistic path to a future in the construction trades. As always, thanks for listening to the podcast. I hope you're subscribed, and if you haven't already, please rate this show so others can find it on their favorite platforms. Lastly, if you have an interesting story and would like to tell it on this podcast, let me know. Drop me an email and let's chat. My email will appear in the show notes below. Thanks. Now, on to the show.
Hey everyone, I'm Gordon Coyle. Welcome to the New York Business Leaders Podcast. I'm really happy to have with me this morning Peter Morandi from Eastman Cooke Construction. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Gordon. I appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate your time being here. So why don't you give us a quick snapshot of who Eastman Cooke Construction is and what your role is and what you do on a daily basis?
Sure. Thank you. First and foremost, thanks for having me. This is great. You've been a great partner in Connect 4 and a good friend. So I certainly appreciate the time and effort that you're taking to do this with me.
My pleasure.
I founded Eastman Cooke 11 years ago, and we're a construction company and general contractor, construction manager here in New York City, 5 boroughs, Long Island, and northern central Jersey. We founded Eastman Cooke 11 years ago here in New York City, and we are definitely a New York City-centric contractor, construction manager, and builder. We're working in the 5 boroughs and out to about Riverhead on Long Island and in northern central Jersey. And we do just that. We help builders, we help developers and building owners plan projects and execute on their projects.
Tell me about the kinds of projects you're working on right now.
Interestingly enough, we have a wide array of projects going on right now. One of the things that we've seen a change in is the conversion of retail. And what we've done is converted a few spaces now from retail into medical. So we have a large medical portfolio inside the hospital groups, but also the smaller ambulatory surgery cares, the standalone centers. We've been putting those up in all different types of areas, repurposing buildings, and also in existing facilities that medical owners have. We've also been building car dealerships. So luxury brands, Land Rover, Jaguar, Audi, Mercedes-Benz. We have 2 large projects going up right now for Land Rover, Jaguar, one in Brooklyn and one in Long Island, New York. And we're doing some, interestingly enough, office fit-outs, which is an interesting, slow market, but we've been able to pick some work up for some not-for-profits. And we're doing a lot of preliminary work right now with owners, testing the waters, seeing if their projects are financially viable to move forward, seeing if their spaces are able to house a warehouse or a new type of use for their properties that they have.
So a combination of ground up construction as well as renovation conversion work.
Correct. Yep.
And how big is your crew and what kind of work are your crews doing?
So we manage all the process. We manage it from the beginning with an architect and engineer and an owner to take a look at what it is that it's going to take to build a project. Look at the approval process, the zoning, the permitting, and we're right there to look at the design as well to make sure that the buildability of the project works as well. And then we get into the actual construction of it. Because we've done the planning up front with the owner and with the design team, that execution is much easier. And we take it right through to the closeout when we're walking out the door and their staff is moving in. We're running projects anywhere right now from $500,000 to $25, $26 million. So that's the small interior fit out right up into what you were talking about before, the ground up building.
Great. So we've had a challenging period of time for every business. I know you're going to comment on cost of materials and things like that, but tell us about some of the challenges you're facing and what you're doing to address them.
We were very fortunate during COVID because we had essential work. Auto dealerships, medical facilities were all essential businesses. We also got some work in for the not-for-profit industry because that was essential as well. So we really stayed very busy during the shutdown and then ramped right back up into putting ground up buildings again and completing fit outs across the board. Materials, skilled labor, it's a huge issue for us. Lead times that used to be average, and we knew them, have doubled in some cases. Materials that we thought we could get, simple things like insulation or drywall, plywood, there are shortages of now. And the cost increases that we've seen have been challenging to us and challenging to our owners. A year or 2 years ago, when an owner was doing a project and they had a certain budget, now those materials are not available at those same prices. And it does cause a conflict between us and an owner, but we're trying to mitigate those costs the best we can by finding some other types of value engineering in a project that might help them. So for instance, we're on a project right now where we were able to value engineer the mechanical system and offset the increased cost of the steel with the cost of the mechanical systems. And owners are appreciating that we are able to stay with those prices and be able to give them the same product that they were looking for in the original design, but modify it enough so there is some savings that can be horse traded from one side or one trade to another.
Got it. And what happens in your world when the cost of materials go up? I mean, can you flex the end price of the job to the owner? I mean, how does that work?
There is some language in our contracts that allow for it. It's very difficult to go through and understand that language. To be honest with you, the way that we work is that we don't take the contract out of the drawer unless there's a serious problem with our performance or the owner's payments. Other than that, we're going to work with a client to figure out how we can address the issues that we're having, the cost increases, the skilled labor, the delays with materials, and we both take a stake in it. At the end of the day, that's what ends up happening is that we'll take on a portion of it, the owner will take on a portion of it, our subcontractors will take on a portion of it, and we share some of that because none of us, our subcontractors or the owners have any control over what's happening in the markets with material pricing.
So it all comes down to conversations, relationships. It's not contracts and suing each other. It's really all conversational to try to reach the best potential outcomes for everybody that's involved.
Right. So we'll look at, we do a lot of multiple projects for repeat business for clients. We'll take a look at these projects in aggregate. Rather than looking at them individually, we'll take 2 or 3 projects and say, we may need to use some of the budget on this project or something that increased because we budgeted 3 years ago. Or we may need to look at the next future project and understand that we need to make some accommodations or some contingency on that project because we know what happened on the past projects.
Great. Now, there's 2 things I want to talk about today, and I know one of them you have a big hand in, and that's the workforce program at LaGuardia Community College. Is that right?
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
We connected with LaGuardia a number of years ago, and we've been developing a program with them. Obviously, pretty challenged this year because everything went online, and teaching workforce skills, which are hands-on, is very difficult to do online. You can't be a scientist without a lab. What we worked with them is that we have a challenge in our industry, as I talked about before, where skilled labor has dwindled and the demand for skilled labor has gone up. And we don't have great training programs on the open shop side. It's up to the individual companies to come in and put together some type of workforce training program. It's not necessarily consistent. And more than that, it's time consuming and they don't always have a facility to be able to do it. Some of the best in the industries do it and they do a great job about it. And they're doing that because they want to have that workforce be a part of that. The program that we're developing with LaGuardia Community College is one that will take their student base, and they have a large student base there, and give them a pathway. And that's really, at the end of the day, what our goal is to give them a pathway to say, if you stick with the program for a year or 2 years or 5 years, whatever the trade might be, here's what the earning potential looks like year over year. And then when you hit the end of the program, where you could be in a range. And it takes the student into a place that says, I understand what I have to do now to enter a certain income bracket, which most course catalogs in colleges don't include that. The difference between being a dental hygienist and being an electrician, it just shows you what courses you have to take, not the pathway to get there, not the commitment that you need to take, and not what your earning potential is at the end of that, because it gets real when we do a placement out into the construction field. That's where we can start that out as apprenticeship programs earlier in the process, and then once they're done with their program, they can go out and get into the workforce and see in reality that they can have those kinds of earning that's out there.
And are other contractors other than Eastman Cooke involved in this workforce program?
There are. We have some subcontractors involved with it. We've been speaking with some other general contractors about it. It's very early on in the stages of development, but it's going to get some legs under it and very quickly. As the demand increases, the current workforce that we have dwindles, and the need and the desire for education increases, we think we've got a pretty good model for this.
Yeah, I would think so. I've talked about it with other guests on this show. The definition of work has changed. COVID changed the way we view work. A lot of people moved out of the New York metropolitan area, so that kind of decreased the number of workers. So there's a lot of pressure on a lot of industries, construction being one of them, that's being challenged by this. So I think it's a great idea. When do you think that this may start to, come to fruition and actually produce some workers that are ready for the workforce?
I think that there's a couple different parts of that have to be answered. One of which is, does everyone go back to classroom education in the fall? And there are some mixed opinions about that. We're a unique industry. So let me take a step back for 1 second. COVID definitely changed the way we work in most cases. Someone who worked in an office can now go home and work in a home office. Someone who's in the construction field, out in the trades, out in the field, can't. They have to work there with their hands, show up every day, be exposed to the elements, be exposed to other people. It's just the way that works. The training is also the same way. It's in person. It's hands-on. You need an instructor to show you how that skill works, how you wire something up, how you cut something, how you sweat a pipe. Those are all experiences that are gained with teachers in person. So part of it really depends on when we can get back to the classroom, when we can get back to the facilities that do this type of training. And I think that's probably a year away before we can get the program put into place and put into a facility where we can actually get some hands-on training going the right direction.
Got it. But if you don't build it now, you won't be reaping the fruits of the labor sometime down the future. You got to start somewhere, I guess.
Absolutely. We're already behind the curve. We've been talking about this for 3 years and trying to put some of it into place. And it's been successful in some cases. We want to expand it. We want to expand it so there's a labor pool that comes out that's educated, that understands. This is not just about skills, picking up skills in the craft itself. It's also an understanding of safety. It's an understanding of job site etiquette, of expectations, when you show up, how you show up, what you need to do every day. We're looking for not a stopgap for an individual. We're looking for a career. And we have a tough PR problem in the construction industry. Trying to tell a young person to go out in the field where it's hot in the summer and it's cold in the winter and you're under not the greatest conditions in the world and you're going to work physically, and that's instead of being a YouTube star or a TikTok star, it's a tough sell.
Yeah.
It really is. We don't have the same thing that used to happen from generation to generation, where John was a carpenter, then John's son becomes a carpenter, and then John's son's son becomes a carpenter. It's a tremendous amount of desire to get into different fields now. So we're fighting an uphill battle. But the way we look at this is, the better we can publicize it, the better we can show what the earnings potential is, that could be an incentive.
For sure. For sure. And I have to laugh. In the insurance business, we don't have, hot working conditions in the summer and cold working conditions in the winter, but it's still hard to recruit, young people into the insurance industry because it's not as exciting. It's not as sexy as investment banking or whatever,
Yeah.
So I kind of feel your pain.
I don't quite understand it because I love driving down to the city we'll go to a Yankees game or something and I'll point out 4 or 5 projects that I built. Big buildings, substantial ground up buildings that are going to be there for a very long time. And then the part that tugs at my heartstrings is when we're coming home a year later, 2 years later from a game. And I don't even mention, hey, Daddy, did you build that? It's a great feeling.
Yeah, it certainly is. And it's something to be proud of for sure. Now, I know you and I have spoken about Eastman Cooke's Work Smart system, and I know that's a big passion for you. Let's talk about that. What is it? How does it work? Where's it going? And what's its really unique features that owners benefit from?
I spoke a little bit about this when we started. It's getting into a project early. It's having a formulated plan that makes sure as we uncover every rock and every stone that may be a rock in the road later on. And what we've been able to do is put projects into what we call project development. And that takes a hard look at what do we need to do before we actually put a shovel in the ground, before we actually start. A look at the buildability of a project, the budget, the permitting, the zoning, all the things that go up front before we actually get started. Working with an architect and engineer, working with the owners themselves, and mapping out a plan of how we're going to do it. And we've had some great successes in this. We saved one of our clients over $1 million on a foundation because we got together with a structural engineer and one of our subcontractors and said, we understand what we need to do to support the building, but how do we do it more efficiently and more effectively? And we were able to go out and do some real hands-on testing in the field. We did a test pile program, is what they call it. We were able to cut almost half of the piles out of the project, which was a substantial savings. Certainly something that our client appreciated. And it didn't compromise the project at all. And that's what we're looking to do. We're not looking to compromise the project. We're not looking to cheapen it up. We're looking to get the same results out of it with a desire from a client that may want to do something more economically, or may want to do something a little bit quicker, or may want to do something that is more expansive or less expansive than what they were already doing. So the system starts with asking all those really deep, probing questions about what the project is and how it will be executed. And then we come back with some answers. We bring in the best and the brightest in the industry, as far as consultants, as far as some of our friends that we know that we can just ask for some advice from. And then when it hits our office, we're putting it through a very intense estimating and budgeting platform that we've created here. It's something that's unique to us and unique to the industry. It's ours, it's proprietary, and it's super flexible. Once we put all the information into it, then we can adjust things if there are some changes that an owner wants to make or a design team wants to make. It's very, very nimble, which is so helpful on a project. We're not budgeting or bidding projects once or twice anymore. We're up to 7, 8, 9, 10 times on a single project before we get to the number that works. And there's a variety of reasons for things to change. Once that's ready to go into production, once we're ready to execute on the project, we have a very intense pre-job planning process where we're asking that everything got set up the way it needs to be set up. We're ready to go. Do we have any open questions? And if we do, we're answering them. We take a look at a project a third of the way through. We look at the project 2/3 of the way through. We take 2 deeper dives into it. And at the end of the project, we're looking and saying, what is it going to take to get this across the finish line? And when we finish a project, we look back and say, what did we do right? And what could we have done better? And how do we carry that on to the next project? All of that data feeds right back into our estimating and budgeting platform. So we're able to use historic data, subcontractor base, unit costs, schedules, anything that affected the projects that we're doing goes back into the system, and it's just more data. It's just more information that we have there to be able to be even better on the next project from the very start, from the very beginning. What we look to do through the Work Smart system is to start, execute, and finish strong. Give a really great quality project and a great quality product to our clients.
How long has this WorkSmart system kind of been in place? Is it relatively new?
No, we started the company with it. We started and have developed it for the past 11 years. So there are certain things that are indelible, like our estimating platform. It might get tweaked a little bit, but nothing in a wholesale change happens with it. We've tweaked our processes a bit as things have changed for the building department, where there are certain items that we're looking at that aren't quite as important anymore. Something else may have ratcheted up above it that is more important now. The basis of it has been solid, a real solid foundation for the company. And we use the Sales Management Institute, FMI, helped us to develop it. It was homegrown. They gave us the questions to answer, and as we did, it developed the process. And we bring them back every year. They ask us how it's working. We go and look at it through and through, and we figure out the things that have to be tweaked a little bit. Here's a great example. We now have, as part of the process, what do we see material escalation prices going to be? What do we need to do to modify our contract to include that, or to at least inform the client, educate our client about what cost increases may be there because of the industry. We did this a number of years ago when the safety rules changed in New York City. When they announced them, then we had to have different certifications on projects and different safety procedures. We put it right in there. So those are the kind of tweaks that we do to the WorkSmart system. It doesn't change the overall process or the overall effect of it, though.
So this is a pretty unique process. I would imagine that a lot of contractors in your space don't have something like this. Is that correct?
I don't think so. I think that they may have their own processes that they use and their own procedures that they may use. This one tends to be a lot more user-friendly for us, for our consultants, and for the owners themselves. Owners don't always necessarily know that we're going through this process, but then they see the flow of a project and it works. And we don't get hung up on things because we've asked all the questions ahead of time and answered all those questions ahead of time. So it's the kind of thing that you don't know that it's working until you see that it works. Everything's going swimmingly and you think, oh, wow, this is the way projects always should run. Not really. We're doing all this upfront work to make sure it runs that way, rather than trying to put fires out on.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that you'll do multiple projects for an owner, and I would have to imagine that this has a positive impact on those relationships with owners and developers, correct?
Yeah, it's interesting because our clients will come back to us and they'll ask us about a challenge we may have had in the project, and it will be, oh, do we need to look at Con Edison again because we had the problem in the last project? Already taken care of. We've already put it in there. We already know that was a challenge on that one, so we're making sure we address it a little bit earlier on this one. So it certainly educates them, and they help to feed into the system to make sure that all of the things that we need to address get addressed.
Sounds like a real kind of value add system, as well as a client retention tool and further development of relationships down the road.
Oh, it certainly is. It certainly is. Our clients have responded very positively. They certainly appreciate that when we're ready to go, we're really ready to go, and then we can finish a project strong. Turnover, this is not their business. It's our business. We're builders, we're contractors, we're construction managers. We're giving them a product that they're going to have for a very long time, 20 years, 30 years, maybe 100 years. So we want to make sure that we give them the right product. We want to give them something that's going to work for them to then run their businesses with. Take some of that pressure off them. They're in their business because that's what they do. They sell cars, they do surgeries, they're servicing the community. We just need to give them that piece of it that gives them a place to work out of, to operate, to manufacture, to do the things that they do.
Right. Interesting perspective. I often find that clients know what they know. Outside of that realm, they don't know, and that's when expertise really comes into play. I think, and that's true of all of us that are successful in our businesses.
Absolutely.
Peter, I want to be respectful of our time today. Is there anything else you wanted to chat about?
No, I think this is great. I appreciate you having me on and taking this time out of your busy schedule, I know, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome, and I appreciate you spending time with us on today's show. If somebody wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
Just drop me an email. It's peter@eastmancooke.com. Let me know what type of project you're looking at. And if you need us to pick our brains, ask us some early preliminary questions, we're here to answer those.
That's great. So everybody, Peter Morandi from Eastman Cooke Construction, thank you very much for being on the show today. If you've got an interesting story that you'd like to have featured on the New York Business Leaders Podcast, reach out to me. My name is Gordon Coyle. My contact info is going to be in the show notes. I'll put Peter's email address as well in the show notes. Have a great day, and thanks again, Peter.
Thank you.
That's it for this week's episode of the New York Business Leaders Podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss next week's episode. In the meantime, find more interviews and resources at nybusinessleaders.com.